So anyway, where do you come down on this whole topic, this whole thing of like benching star players, which is a big thing, the whole Alfari team, Liquid Jack? Where do you want to start on this, Barry?
Well, so I'll start with like kind of just the coaching in general now, right? Like, because I've worked with some coaches before. Song was one of my clients in the past, and then just like I'm friends with.
When he was at TSM,
coaches. Yeah, he was at TSM.
Oh, okay.
I was representing him when he was on TSM, and when he was on Echo Fox, and when he was on CLG.
Okay.
So, like and I've had a lot of friends that were assistant coaches, and coaches. So I think the dynamic that I always had an issue with in LCS is that usually the rosters put together and then coaches get brought in after the fact. Like there's like nowadays it's been changing where like teams have been prioritizing bringing in the coaches before assembling the roster. But like, you know, even like 2 years ago, it used to be that like the teams would really just like jump the gun on like bringing in star players, and then they would assemble the staff around and the staff and the roster around the coaches. And so it created this dynamic where it felt like the coaches were really just answering to the players, where they had to like cater to the players' needs, when usually like, you know, I was thinking more of like, you know, an NFL type of situation where the coach is the person that's like in control. All the players are trying to impress that coach. Like
Belichick type guy.
Yeah, but like it ended up turning out more like what the NBA is right now, right? Like where like you have all these star players, and if the star player doesn't like you, then the coach is out. So I think like one of the issues I have with coaching is that coaches never really got a fair shake at like a long-term development plan with an org, because they would be brought in into like an environment where they have to impress the players, and then the players, they have to earn the players' respect rather than having the players' respect already, like at least to like a certain base level. So it just became it was hard for coaches to really like thrive in that environment, or even if they make one mistake, they erode all trust and all their like, you know, all the trust is out the window if they make one mistake in one game.
Let me add to that too, because I have had some times where I have applied to try to be a coach, and some of what I felt was that even if I wanted to put myself in the position where I want to learn from the players, I want to be in a position where I'm willing to accept that I'm not going to start as the best coach, allow me to learn and not be that enforcing authority over the players immediately. That was not something that it felt like the organizations wanted, that the people that were making the decisions behind hiring coaches were more interested in seeing a coach that was going to hold the entire thing together, that would hold the team by the reins and just have the players at their entire mercy. So even if the players and the coach wanted that, it felt like to me that the organizations themselves weren't interested in that kind of structure.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so like you get a lot of weird situations that happen because of that, right? Like, I mean, the coaches are so afraid to be the one that makes the mistake. So, for example, like one of the things that, you know, like one of the things I hear a lot about is that when a team practices for a specific week, they have specific picks ready, they have specific game plans ready, but then the moment they get on stage, like the players panic and then they say, oh, I can't play that anymore. Like I can't, like we practice this, I can't play that. I have to play this into this specific matchup in this situation. And then as a coach, you're in a really awkward position. And then because like you can either say, no, we're sticking to our plan, we're sticking to our system, and the player goes in with zero confidence, or you give the player what they want, and then it doesn't work out because it was a stupid panic move.
Yes.
And then so like you're stuck in this catch-22 situation where you're going to be blamed either way, because at the end of the day, people are going to look at the draft and then they're not going to they don't know what's going on behind in the comms. So like it's like, oh yeah, the coach fucked up the draft. And it's like, it's not necessarily the case, because like a lot of times when bad drafts happen is because players suddenly were like, I don't want to play this. I want to do this other thing now. Yes. So it's like, coaching has always been this like really weird thing in League of Legends, because in order to do it effectively, you really have to have the trust and respect of players. And that's so hard to do, because like, you know, you can even look at Reaper, right? Like Reaper, when he was on Cloud9, the players trust and respected him up until they didn't. Yes. And then things just fell apart, and then he had to leave because of it. So it's like, you have like coaching in general is so difficult in League of Legends. So like, I mean, if you want to like tie this back to like the whole like Alfari thing, is that like, I actually like the fact that like the coach is really in charge of, right? If they're the ones that are calling the shots, like making sure like this is my vision for how the team is, and ultimately at the end of the day, ownership is the one that's going to agree with whether they did a good job or not, right? Okay. So in that respect, I actually really like that. If the coach is the person that is saying that like this is not working out for my vision for this roster, we're gonna bench Alfari to go in this like to keep the program on track. I think that's actually a good thing, honestly.
Problem with that is, if you make it hypothetical, I would agree. Like, if what you're saying is this, I like it when the coach is empowered by the org. He gets kind of like the final say on how the team's going to run, how it's going to look, who's going to play. I like that as a concept, but I think to me, where I diverge is this, because I've said that many times. I've said, I think like I don't even know what the point in being a coach is if I don't decide those things. I get judged as if I did, and I get judged on the result, but I never got to actually, that's like I get judged on the outcome of a meal. I didn't get to choose the ingredients or how it was cooked. Like, what the fuck did I have to do with it then? Like, I just watched it in the oven. Like, what is this shit? So in that scenario, look, I agree with that, but my problem here is, in the case of Alfari, based on what I know, and some of the past ones, like, you know what, Jensen, when he got benched by Cloud9 and Reapered, the problem I have is this, is, in my opinion, the reason that you should be allowed to bench him and the power of the bench is performance-based. If Jensen isn't playing the way he should be, I bench him. If he isn't practicing, like he isn't practicing enough, maybe I bench him, you know. But in terms of like behavioural stuff is more like, I want you to have saying, like, you know, don't talk to him that way, or like, you know, I'm going to lead this discussion. I don't want it to be like, right, you know, the way you're behaving, I don't like it, so you benched. Because in my opinion, like, then you're actually sort of fucking up the org side as well. It's like, I signed this player for millions. Like, I want him playing, and that's where some of them feel like they go too far, mate.
Well, the only time I think benching for behavior makes sense is if it's affecting the other player's play, right?
Sure.
So like if, like, I mean, you hear like stories about like a player goes on stage and they just whine and moan because things aren't going their way and it tilts everybody else. If that's the case, I think for those reasons, it's okay to bench.
All right. Yeah, that's a good caveat. Yeah. What do you think, Ross?
I think you should be able to handle conflicts outside of the game much better than that, though. Like, I don't think decisions should be made so spur of the moment. Now, we are inferring that it was made spur of the moment, the benching of Alfari, and I think it's pretty
I heard it was
that's what happened, right?
Premeditated.
Sure.
Yeah, premeditated.
I heard it was a first-degree benching, you know?
There you go.
But, like, I think that those things, you shouldn't be dispensing them so freely, because now how does the rest of the team feel, right? You're managing relationships. That's really what you're doing there as a coach. And so you now just showed your hand as a coach that you are willing to bench the best player for a single instance of a behavior that is disagreeing with. So that is not going to create a positive environment for actually improving, because now to be able to improve, you're going to have certain clash of opinions, but no longer will the players feel confident in doing that because they don't actually know how far they can go, because one instance and suddenly you're out. So this can only hurt the team in the long run if they're actually trying to progress and improving. They're probably going to deteriorate if they don't have a way to solve the ability to have actual open conversations. And I think this is the start of that going downhill.
I mean, we don't publicly know what the exact reason.
Certainly, yeah.
Because what's the public reason they gave? I think it was that
they said like he was having some personal issues. Yeah, something like that.
So,
and they implied it was performance related. That's why they said, you know, a month earlier we were thinking about it. They sort of made me everything except that there was an argument. You know, anything except that, basically.
I mean, like, we could speculate.
Personal issues means anything, right? That's entirely that's an entirely ambiguous phrase.
That was my joke was, he has personal issues. He personally hates the court. That was the joke, you know what I mean? To tie it back in, you know.
I mean, that is quite the personal issue.
It's a pretty big one, yeah. Like, you know, it might demand you don't play in the team anymore.
One might say that might become a professional issue.
Exactly.
Oh God!
There's another angle I have on this one, right? Is like we say, we're also taking this like org down. You know, you get the coach, you empower the coach. One thing in general, though, I think there is no place for in coaching. Listen, players, it's almost impossible to avoid this because they're so young and their whole identity is based on how good they are at the game. That's what they fucking pride themselves on. So players are always going to have big egos. Now, listen, I don't mind a coach having an ego in the sense that like the great coaches obviously think they know they're right, and you know I understand this way, and I'm going to fight you on it, but I don't think you should ever have ego in the sense that you cut off your nose to spite your face. Like, I'll give an example here. I told this story on Crackdown in the off season, and every moron just ignored it. It wasn't even a big scandal on Reddit. People just ignored the story because they listened to Doublelift's stream. Shall I tell you the story that I heard from 2 different sources, both legit, about the off-season in Doublelift? It's that it went like this. Doublelift was like, they were trying to get a bunch of different players, and Doublelift basically was like, even though he himself had recommended this like Vietnamese support, I think it was a guy called Pallet or something, he didn't actually want to play with him apparently. And so then he was like, I don't really want to play with him. If I play again, it has to be with like a really good player like Sword Art. Like I want some like big name player to be brought in. So then basically I heard Reggie just got pissed off with this because he's always had sort of an off and on relationship with Doublelift. That's why he almost basically was fully booted in season 7. People don't know when he went to Liquid, that was Doublelift's way of getting back into TSM by showing like I can beat you on a worse team and I can requalify them. And that's how he got his starting spot back. Before that, Reggie was telling me, you even said that, basically implied this in an interview, like it's going to be Wild Turtle and Doublelift competing for this spot. And so he was trying to sort of cock Doublelift a bit. So basically, they've always had an on and off relationship. And I'm sure it's also awkward, the whole. You can imagine the third entity in this whole scenario. No, we don't have to. But I'm just saying, it's in the background. Yeah. By the way, they made that public, and she works as the president, so you can't ignore that. That's always in the room. That is the elephant in the room. So here's the issue, though, is when you do that, right, I heard then basically Reggie gets pissed at this, so he goes out and he signs Sword Art for a massive amount of money, and then he effectively just tells Doublelift, oh, you probably want to play now, don't you? On your fucking bike, you're out, mate. And then Doublelift at that point, by the way, has to scramble and only has like shitter teams available, and basically just says, yeah, fuck it, I'm just going to be a streamer. Now, he played it off like, none of this is true, it's all that. That's what I heard from a couple of different legit sources, put it that way. Come on, Barry.
Regardless of that being true or not, Lost is a fantastic player.
He's pretty
and
good.
He's also a fantastic human being. Like, he's a great... Like,
Are you repping Lost? Are you repping
No. But, like, I've known him personally when he was on Echo Fox on Academy as well. But like I've known him personally, so it's just like
fair enough.
He's a great teammate.
So by the way,
like,
just
I
for the sake of
for them, honestly.
By the way, Crumbs has got a point there. If when we're doing this actual show, you rep a player, if you could just give a disclaimer, yeah, that's just so we know. Because by the way, the point I was making there was that's not the quote. That's an example of a fucking owner doing an ego move. What he essentially did is just out of ego, a player he did want, who by the way has just won in the championship and number of championships. He basically just kicks you. And does like a weird, even though listen, if you invest 6 million into a support, you want the AD carry to be a fucking like a legit player that you know can perform as well. So like, in my opinion, like there's no place for that kind of ego. You know, you can have disputes, but you never ruin the actual performance of the team. It's the reason why I revere that whole like Kobe, Shaq, Lakers team. Because the fact they held it together and won is legit as fuck, because you know they didn't like each other.
Let me add something there that you actually just made me think about that. I think has rarely been addressed. 6 million for the player, right? For Sorda. You got how many millions for perks, how many millions for Alfari? But these things are actually creating spite within the organizations, specifically for management, because the salaries for the players are so astronomically high now. But the management himself, the people that are supposed to train these people, that are supposed to level them up, create the structure around them, stays the same. So then you're, as a management or whatever your role is, you're suddenly feeling entirely undervalued when the team has no problem shelling out millions for someone and can't give you a 20K raise. So there is a building resentment within organizations if you're just management and dealing with these incredibly ludicrous numbers for signings. So I think that the teams are actually going to have to take a better look at how they're spending the money around players.
I think the issue generally is that I think the issue is generally most teams are playing with monopoly money, at least like to their perspective. So like they don't actually understand the values of the money that they're giving out. Like I'm not saying in terms like they don't understand the value amount of the dollars they're using, but it's not like for example, this is like revenue they've earned. They need to make sure they have a specific.
It's not their money in a sense. Stay in the black.
It's almost like monopoly money to them in a sense, where they're getting this money and then they got this cash infusion that, okay, we have this money to spend, but it's not necessarily like balanced against the revenue, right? So we're in this like weird budget situation where teams end up doing that and then they nickel dime everything else. So it's
thing is though, I know what Crumbs means by that though, because like put it this way, in that scenario, I almost do feel like the people who are the big money signings, that's why so many of them have been benched. It's almost like the resentment goes like this. Instead of it being the other way, like I spent so much money for you, I need you to play. It's almost like, right, if you act a tall like Diva-ish or bratty and I'm paying you millions and I get paid, 500k a year, fuck that. This guy's benched, like teach him a lesson. Because it reminds me actually what happened in the talent industry in esports, which is when in CSGO, the game started to explode year after after year after year, we got in these mad scenarios where the guy who hires you to work the event, he's just a company man, and he might make what used to be a very good salary in esports. Like maybe he makes $150,000 a year, 200,000. But the problem is we're all on day rates that have skyrocketed, and so he knows that when he hires us for a week, we might be making $8,000 just for that week. And so in that scenario, he's like, what the fuck? That's almost my monthly wage. And by the way, they would resent you. Like if any minor thing, they would sort of be looking almost to be like, oh, fuck this guy, he's just ungrateful. It's like, and they didn't realize that to you weren't thinking of it in like a relative sense like that, because you were only thinking relative to your part of the industry. Like what the other guy, you think, well, I'm the best in my field and this is what they get paid. So I was never conscious that way, but I noticed that was a thing in orgs that could sort of creep in. I didn't notice early on.
It's
personally
a big
never
deal. Like GM salaries are like 150, right? Like how much does the GM make? Maybe 100K, 150.
150 is on the high end, honestly.
Exactly. Like you're a GM making barely 100K for players that are dealing with multi-million yearly salaries.
Yes.
Like
well,
things are not going to go well.
Okay, so I think kind of like the